Yeah, on my way home here, I'm going to talk for a few minutes if I can. If I can talk and bike at the same time. About the universal theory of a good ride. And maybe there's an equation for it too, I don't know, maybe some constants. When I think about this, I think a lot about Jeff Speck and how he would define a good walk. Those of you who know who Jeff Speck is, he is, or those of you who don't know about who he is a guru, an architect, who's written a couple great books on walking. One, The Walkable City, and two, Walkable City Rules. Oh, look at the cute puppy dog. And he defines a good walk as a walk that is, if I get this right, useful, safe, attractive, and interesting. I think there's a similar way of defining a good walk amongst, or excuse me, a good ride within cyclists. No, you're good. You got the walk sign now. So a good ride needs to be safe, effective, meaning it needs to get you where you need to get, and it needs to be pleasant. So I don't know if it necessarily needs to be as interesting as a good walk, because I think cycling in itself is interesting. I think you move fast enough that there's enough things that you experience that are going to hold your interest, that you don't have to be entertained by the things around you. But it has to be pleasant. And frequently, you have to sacrifice in one area to achieve more in the other. And generally speaking, I choose safety most of the time, but probably my biggest factor is going to be, is the ride pleasant? And I will sometimes sacrifice a little bit of safety, definitely sacrifice efficiency, you know, the quickest route, for something that's more pleasant. Now, pleasant can be a number of things. You know, the absence of risk makes it pleasant, but that is encompassed by safety. So I won't really talk about that. But there are factors that make something more interesting and pleasant. Now, I just moved through a space back there that was a parking lot and very heavy traffic. So that incorporates a lot of things that are unpleasant about driving. Also, I've got a conflict point here, which is a safety issue, but it also just makes it less pleasant because I have to stop thinking about enjoying my ride and think about, for a moment, the safety, simply because there's a number of obstacles, like a grocery cart, or potential conflict points like this entrance. I have to look behind me, I have to look in front of me, I have to look left, I have to look right. And that takes my eyes off these pretty trees and this wonderful landscaping that occurred over here. And the people around me that I might see. So, having a ride that has limited conflict points makes it more pleasant. Additionally, as you can see here, I'm off the road, and I've got a fair amount of green space between me and the cars. That actually makes a big difference. So space and separation is really important. There's a couple spots, if I kept going on Park, there's actually a fairly wide mixed-use path that is right up against the road, the arterial road. And it's unpleasant. You know, you'll have vehicles moving past you 50 miles an hour just a few feet away. Now, what makes that unpleasant? Again, it does come back to safety, but it's also a bit of an insult to our senses. So we'll talk about the other senses. I mentioned briefly green space. That could be over on the footpath on the right here, I guess. That does, there's a balance between being on the street versus being on the footpath or the sidewalk, because you reduce some of your conflict points. You make yourself more visible by being in the street, but you run more risk. Now, this is a designated cycleway. It's relatively quiet. It's wide enough. And actually, most drivers are quite kind. Like this guy passing me right now, slowing down nicely, taking a fairly wide berth, being careful. And that's nice. Most of the drivers around here are actually quite good. And I really appreciate that. Again, if you pay attention, most drivers are kind and cautious around cyclists. That's a good thing. I went through that stop sign about as fast as that car did, so we're all using the road the same way. But back to our senses. So, visually pleasing. I can see green space around me. That's wonderful. Plants. I can see trees. The tree to vehicle ratio needs to be much greater than 1, as much over 1 as possible. The greater the tree to vehicle ratio is, the more pleasant a ride is. Now, if those trees also provide some shade, especially in a place like Dallas, hot Dallas, in the summer, then that adds to the pleasant nature of the ride. So, that's important. One of the other senses that is important to take care of is your sense of hearing. I like to hear the things around me. Whether it's the birds, especially if it's natural sounds. The birds, water, people talking, those are natural sounds that I enjoy. What I don't enjoy is loud vehicle noise, which comes both from the wheels, tires, and the engines. Construction noise. Again, I guess construction has to happen. Drivers have to have it. But if you're on a slower road like this, you'll have less traffic and therefore less danger and risk, but also less noise. Every time a car goes by, it disturbs what's otherwise tranquil. And as some of my favorite commentators like to say, cities are not loud. Cars are loud. Popo. Yes, cities are not loud, cars are loud. Some cars are louder than others. Big engines, bad mufflers, toy racers, those are all too loud. But lawn equipment is loud too, so I'm not a huge fan of lawn equipment. Move over for a second, I have a little space, I can let this car pass me. So, and interestingly, I don't talk as much when there's cars are passing me because I know it's just loud. And not only can my camera not hear me, I really can't hear myself think when there's noise. So, sense of sound is important. Also, being able to say hello to people. If it's quiet, you can say hello. Hi guys. So like that, I just said hi, fairly quietly, and they heard me. If this car was driving by at the same time, there's no chance they would have heard me. So the quiet allows you to interact with the people around you if you want to. And I'm an introvert. I don't really like talking to people a lot. I don't like chit chat, small talk, all that kind of stuff. I can do it, but I'd rather either have a deep conversation with somebody or nod and smile and wave as I go by. Biking's perfect for that. So, another sense that's important to really think about when you're thinking about a pleasant ride is your sense of smell. So, I'm a Gen Xer. I grew up mowing lawns, and nobody on this video can smell it right now, but I can smell cut grass here, and it smells good. I like it. I like the smell of cut grass. I like smelling the seasonal smells of different plants, flowers, etc. as they bloom throughout the year. I like the smell of food sometimes when you're traveling in the suburbs, especially on an evening, Friday or Saturday or Sunday. You smell cookout. Oh, that's good. That's good. But if you travel early in the morning, some of the best smells I've smelled, baking bread in cities. I love riding in cities because, you know, the restaurants and the bakeries, they get up early, they start baking, and you smell the fresh baked bread, the croissants, the donuts. You go by a Mexican restaurant that makes their own chips. The smell of chips being made in the morning, that's amazing. What a good smell. Love that. And there are some smells that aren't so good. Exhaust, belts that are rubbing or metal on metal. So some of those smells are not uncommon when you ride and are a little less pleasant. So choosing a route that is kind to your nose is important as well. You can see here, this road gets narrow here, and so I have to pay more attention to my riding because I only have about, I don't know, a foot and a half on either side. It's, you know, it's fine, but you don't have the leeway, so you have to pay more attention and you have to engage, you know, your active mind, so it makes it a little less enjoyable. I am riding along a relatively busy arterial, although you look at it right now, it's not real busy. It depends on what the lights, where the lights are at. There's often large gaps on the road. You take a picture of it and you would think that these billion-dollar roads never get used. Now, in front of me, there's a nice wide footpath, but it's right next to this busy road, and I don't like that. That makes it less pleasant. So I'm going to choose a little bit more of a circuitous route here, and this circuitous route also requires that I accept a few more potential interactions and conflicts with drivers, but I will accept that slight reduction in safety for a more pleasant ride. See the trees, the shade, the quiet. I'm away from the road. It's more pleasant. Definitely more pleasant. So I'll accept a little bit extra risk with regards to that. So the tree to car ratio, still around here, the tree to car ratio is impacted by all the parked cars, but there's separation. Again, if I have nature separating me from non-natural elements like cars and roads and noise, makes it easier. Like cicadas, loud. They're very loud, and they don't always sound very natural, but they are natural, and so they're just less of a bother on my ears, on human ears. Human ears tolerate natural sounds better than we tolerate unnatural sounds, which there's some really good research on the health implications of noise and noise pollution. Now again, to my right, I've got a nice wide mixed-use path that I could be riding on. The problem with it is there's not adequate entry and exit points. I would ride on this if it went all the way through. Again, conflict points here, but I'll put up with that to get a little more riding time on this quiet residential street where I can almost convince myself that there's not a large arterial road just on the other side of that pond. But you know what? And again, it's a man-made pond, but it uses natural elements. It separates me, insulates me from the unnatural sounds and sights, sensations that assault me. And again, I'm not being hyperbolic when I use the term assault. Again, there's real data showing the physical harms, morbidity, and mortality associated with unpleasant, unsafe rides. So yeah, I take a little sidetrack through here, again, just to avoid some of the main road. Now, to the credit of our Plano zoners here, I can actually leave. Make a deposit, withdrawal? Nah. Saying hi. I can actually avoid some of this road because it only gets busier on the other side of Ventura. Just listen how much noisier it is here, and how less little green is right here. I smell exhaust. Not pleasant. Yeah. I had some pink slippers that were kind of cool. But as I move past this road, Ventura, as you get that direction, there's a lot more business. So the business is really organized around the corners. Now, unfortunately, because of the design, about 3/4 of the real estate is allocated to parking for cars, at least 3/4. Because of that, you have lots of cement surfaces. Where there is supposedly green surfaces, it's often dead. Noise, it's just less pleasant. But here, they're doing a good job. And you know what? The best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago. The next best time is today. Thankfully, a lot of these trees were planted 10, 20, 30 years ago. So we have some more mature trees. And again, on this road, I have a fairly good tree to car ratio. So that helps make this ride pleasant. So what else makes a ride pleasant? We talked about pleasant enough. Useful? Useful and efficient, it has to get you somewhere. Too much of American infrastructure is focused on recreation for cyclists. You know, when somebody who's a non-cyclist or a very non-creative thinker in terms of transportation, they consider cycling to be a recreation and bicycles toys. Can't tell you like how many times I've had that vocal minority of anti-cyclist people yell at me, "Get a car, get off your toy, quit playing in the roads." Not realizing that I'm on my way to work, I'm on my way to patronize businesses, see friends. I'm doing the same thing they're doing. But I'm also getting healthy and staying happy while I'm doing it. And again, thankfully, you know, my channel is to dispel the myths that cyclists hold, that all drivers and everybody that's not a cycle is against them and it's bad. It's not true. Most of the research, as well as my anecdotal experience, tells me most drivers are cool. They support cyclists, they're careful around us, kind, oftentimes to a fault. sometimes breaking rules or protocols in order to be deferential to cyclists, which I appreciate, but I wish they wouldn't do it. We'll see if somebody does it on the way home. There's a little hill there, that's why I'm a little short of breath. But that's what makes this ride useful. In another way, is that it's getting me my exercise. While I'm getting somewhere positionally, I'm getting somewhere physically, mentally, emotionally, and intellectually too. So it's a useful ride. This car. I ride bikes, but I appreciate nice cars. So that makes any bike ride much more useful than any car ride, just about any car ride, when you're considering the same distances. Now, useful also means, is there a route? It took me about 2 weeks to figure out the route that I wanted to use to get to and from my work. And I had to utilize all these factors. Safety. I knew that it was going to be useful, I was going to get there. So I was set on that. But it needed to be pleasant. So pleasant is another issue. Now, I'm thankful for this medium because it makes this stopping in the center of this arterial a little less unpleasant. But as you can hear, it's noisy. And I have to yell for you to hear me, but if I was quiet here, I still have all this going in my ears. And you know what? It doesn't smell great here. A lot of electric vehicles, like that Tesla. Lots of electric vehicles, so they're not as bad. Or Tesla. They're not as stinky. It still stinks here. And most cars are much more efficient than they used to be, so it's not as bad as it used to be. Now we're going to see here if these cars don't block the box. This guy's waiting. So she's gonna wait, but she's gonna go. That's all right. I'll wave her on. Thanks, though. And I might go another cycle here before I get across. We'll see how the stragglers do here. I'm gonna try to get across. I'm gonna get across here. So, you know, safety. That makes this a little less pleasant because I have to pay attention fairly significantly to the potential risks crossing this road here. But now that I'm across, look at that. I'm, what, a quarter of a block? Half a block away? And it's quiet. I'm not yelling anymore. I'm not yelling. You know, these houses are blocking some of the noise. And the tree to car ratio is improving, which is nice. And I can rest assured a little bit by the fact that the speed limit here is slower. I believe it's 30. Now, I had to look for routes. Back to my determining my route. I had to look for routes that got me where I needed to be. And when I asked Google, Google put me on several of the designated cycle routes that exist in Plano. And we've got over 150 miles of designated cycle routes in Plano. That's amazing. That's awesome. That's great. They have the signs up, say cycle route, they're numbered, and they're arranged to get pretty much anywhere you want to get within this fairly large city of Plano. The problem is that I don't know really any cyclists who are comfortable riding on all those roads at the time that other people want to get places, you know? So during a rush hours, during the day, during the week, Ventura Road that I was on briefly there, I turned off of to go straight. I smell cigar. I kind of like cigar. So that's Ventura over there. It turns into 2-lane, but that's a 2-lane road. But even that road is a little busier a little busy for my tastes. Most of the cyclists I know in Plano that are avid riders ride on those roads, but only as part of a cycling group that's organized. Now the signs also say may take full lane, so our cycling groups ride 2 abreast. We're fairly disciplined and we function quite well, but most of the rides are before and just entering rush hour in the morning, after rush hour in the evening, and then on Saturdays and Sundays. So they have determined they're very limited in their times that they ride because of it's not a safe ride. So it's interesting because if you ask those people, most of those cyclists, like in the Plano Bike Association, they ride for recreation and exercise. So they don't mind if the ride is not useful in the fact that it gets you where you need to be, because they ride in a large circle, with the exception of the caffeine ride, which well, it kind of rides a big circle because it starts and ends at a coffee shop. But at least we do have a destination that's not our house or our home, that is associated with some interacting, some socialization, a little bit of sustenance. So that ride is useful. It's one of the few truly useful rides. They're useful beyond exercise. So yes, it took me 2 weeks to find my ride, and because when I first put it up on Google Maps and used the biking route planner, it took me down several of these designated cycle routes. Now, on this ride, I've been on a couple of them, and they were not bad. Don't turn into me. Good. You never know. Smiles. We were on a couple of them today, but much of where I'm at is either footpaths, sidewalks, which are illegal here in Dallas and Texas. It is legal to ride on the sidewalks, aka footpaths, for my Kiwi friends. But of course, just like we would ask drivers to be careful and cautious and defer to our safety when we're on the road as cyclists, we as cyclists need to defer to the safety of more vulnerable users, especially children, dog walkers, people that are walking. So slow way down. I often go in the grass. I definitely smile and say hi. There's one guy I pass on my route who's walking his dogs, who I've said good morning to several times. And he never says good morning to me, never looks at me. He has a very stern look in his face. I always wonder, does he know that it's okay for me to be on the sidewalk, aka footpath? Said some people think that that it's illegal. I'm breaking the law, which I'm not. Hi guys. So I can talk to the workers too. That's nice. Pleasant. So balancing the utility, the safety, and the pleasantness, I continue to tweak my ride, generally speaking, towards pleasantness, because this is a meditation. Transportation is a meditation that you do every day. It can be a negative meditation where you're angry and frustrated and upset, bitter and sedentary, or it can be a positive meditation where you're physically active, you're engaging all of your senses, and therefore engaging your brain as well as your body. It can be a positive meditation. So I very much opt towards pleasant rides, and I'll add 5, 10, 20% onto a ride if I can make it more pleasant. So that's my general philosophy and theory on good ride. Thank Jeff Speck for giving me inspiration to really understand this. I'm sure I'm not the first person that's done this, but it's good for my brain while I ride. Thanks. As always, tell my kids every day, be kind, do good work, have fun.